running in Congressional District 2, and now that you've all comfortably sat down, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag is up here on the stage. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First, I want to give a big thank you to the Herald and News for presenting this forum with the Klamath County Chamber of Commerce. This is about our community getting to know these candidates that are running to replace Congressman Greg Walden. We all know Greg. We've had a great relationship in this community with Greg Walden. And of course, our desire is to have at least as good a relationship with his replacement as we do with him. I want to again thank you all for attending this evening. My name is Joe Spendolini. Among other things, I'm the Klamath County Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee Chairman, and I'm also your moderator for this evening. Before we go any further, I see one dignitary in the audience I'd like to recognize, Commissioner Derek DeGroot. Actually, I did see another, Sheriff Chris Caber. There you are. Also, past Commissioner Tom Mallins, I saw him somewhere. Thank you all for being here this evening. First, it's my pleasure to introduce to you all for a brief minute or two the Executive Director of the Klamath County Chamber of Commerce, Heather Tramp.
Good evening and welcome to the Republican Candidate Forum for Congressional District 2, sponsored by us, the Klamath County Chamber of Commerce. My name is Heather Tramp and I'm the Executive Director of the Chamber. Joe did it already, but I do want to thank the Herald and News for helping sponsor this event, and thank you all for coming out tonight and attending. I'd also like to thank my Government Affairs Committee, several of you are in the audience, and Chair Joe Spendolini for helping pull this together. Next, I'd like to welcome all the candidates to Klamath County and thank each of you for attending tonight's forum. I know there's a lot of campaigning over the next few months headed into the primary and then on to the elections in November, and I appreciate that you've come here to Klamath County tonight. I want to assure each of you that our community and this chamber is very active when it comes to legislative matters, and we look forward to building a relationship with whomever is elected. Now, I have to say a few things about our Government Affairs Committee. Our chamber has a very active Government Affairs Committee that focuses on making this community a great place to live. As the voice of over 500 businesses in Klamath County, we are committed to keeping Klamath competitive and helping improve the business climate. We believe one of the best ways we can achieve this goal is through the legislative process. We believe in political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in the government, and that's why we've arranged this forum tonight, and we plan to arrange more of these as we move forward. Throughout its history, the Chamber was started in 1905, we've been providing opportunities for candidates seeking public office to take their case directly to the voters. And as a friendly reminder to all of you in attendance, we are welcoming these candidates as guests to our communities, and I ask that each of you, that you give each of them a warm welcome and give each candidate an opportunity to be heard. Again, thank you candidates for your participation tonight and for your willingness to run in this important office, and I thank all of you for coming out tonight.
So, I want to introduce the candidates by name, and you're going to hear from them, and they're going to do a lengthy introduction of themselves. But starting on the left, we've got Ken Medenbach, then Cliff Bentz, Mark Roberts, Jimmy Curmpacker, Jeff Smith, Dr. Knute Buehler, Jason Atkinson, and Justus Livingston. Please welcome them to our stage this evening. So for you guys sitting in the audience, if you have questions for the candidates, some of you have already done this, but if you have questions for the candidates. Those of you that are here volunteering with the chamber, if you would, please stand up where you are.
There's two in the hallway too.
Okay. So these are the folks that you want to submit your questions to. If you think you're going to have a question, raise your hand. They'll bring you an index card and something to write with if you don't have anything. Write your questions down, draw their attention. They'll come pick them up and bring them up here to me. Now I'm going to ask for all of your assistance in keeping things moving as fast as pace as possible, and you'll understand my dilemma when I go over the instructions to the candidates. But please help by holding your verbal feedback until the end of tonight's forum. Now for the candidates, each of you will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. The order will be by random draw. Our executive director is going to draw your names here in a second. You'll have 3 minutes for a closing statement, which will be in the reverse order of the opening statements. You'll have up to 2 minutes to respond to questions. Our timekeeper, which is Heather, will give you a warning when you have 30 seconds left. If you'll hold up the 30-second sign, Heather. And then when your time is up, it's a hard stop, and she'll show you that. At that point, please finish your sentence, but not your thought. If you mention a fellow candidate, that person's going to have the option of responding to you for up to 1 minute. Now, the reason for the tight observance of the clock is very simple math. We're here for 2 hours to hear from 8 candidates with 2 minutes opening and 3 minutes of closing statements. That's 45 minutes off the clock. That leaves 1 hour and 15 minutes for questions. If each of you take the 2 minutes allotted to respond, that's 16 minutes for each question. That leaves time for about 5 or 6 questions. So we're going to really try to keep things moving at a fast pace. And we can only do that with cooperation of both the candidates and you folks sitting in the audience. So, if you don't get your question answered, don't be offended. It's just a matter of time. It's the clock. And don't think that somebody didn't want your question asked. That's not the case at all. But I would encourage you to hang out after we're finished with the formal part of this forum and talk to the candidates individually. I'm sure they'll be willing to hang out and speak to you directly. So, with that in mind, unless any of the candidates have any questions, we'll get started. So, Madam Timekeeper, if you'll please draw for the speaking order, we'll get started. I'm sorry?
One at a time.
Yeah. So I can write them down. So when do I start?
Right now.
I'm Ken Medenbach. I run for the 2nd Congressional District here in Oregon. I spent a little time last week at the cap and trade thing that was going on down over in Salem. And I went through the whole thing, and I'm finding out that right now all we've got is the legislators that left the state. Now that's over with, and now Kate Brown is going to pass these laws. Now I know this hasn't to do too much with the federal, but it'll fit right into my oratory here. But I went around and I talked to the state police, different sessions of legislature, and I just walked in and started rattling this off. And this is Article 1, Section 1 of the Oregon Constitution. Natural rights inherent in people. We declare that all men, when they form a social compact, are equal in right, that all powers inherent in the people and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their peace, safety, and happiness. And they have a right at all times to alter, reform, or abolish the government in such manner as they think proper. Those are strong words. This is our turn. Governor Brown's not going to do nothing. She's going to pass executive order for this cap and trade, and the legislature can't do anything now. So it's up to us, and we have the constitutional authority to do this. Now, on the constitutional end here, or the what do I stand for? I stand for the pro-Constitution, pro-Second Amendment, strong military, take care of veterans, pro-life, elected delegates to interpret the Constitution, not the Supreme Court. You can talk to me after this about that. Cede federal lands to the states, open sustainable logging, open more mining, lawful immigration, build the wall, protect farmers and ranchers, keep government out of marriage, pro-Trump.
Good evening. My name is Jason Atkinson. I am proudly from, born and raised right here in Southern Oregon. And I will tell you a little bit about this room in a second. I, for 14 years, served in the Oregon State Legislature. I was a senator before I took a break to see my son through the rest of high school. I am a conservative. I am for the president. I am 100% pro-life. I have an A+ with the NRA, and I have never voted for a tax. One of the things I thought I would never say in this campaign, but I get to do it tonight, is I am the only person standing up here, sitting up here, who has a State of Jefferson flag zip tied to the back of my drift boat. And I've got the stickers on 2 of my 4 trailers. And I never thought in a million years that would come up in a campaign, but you know, here it is. Our family just celebrated 90 years on the Klamath River, January 29th. So we're excited. Our campaign is going great. I'm excited to get into the details. We've got a lot of things that face us here. The declaration of the drought, certainly here in Klamath County, is a major driver to a lot of our livelihood. We'll get to that, and before I run out of time, let me also say the last time I was in this room was when my fiance graduated from OIT dental program. And I sat where you are and watched her sit up here and get cap and gowned as she graduated. And hopefully this corona mess doesn't get too far out of hand, because Thursday I'm gonna go have another debate with all of my friends up here in Bend as she goes to Guatemala on a mission, a dental mission. So anyway, it's fun to be here. My wife sends her regards, but she's busy packing.
Please hold your applause, folks.
Livingston?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I appreciate that all of you are here. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for holding this, and then also the Herald News for live streaming this online. My name is Justin Livingston. I grew up in rural Marion County, just outside of Salem. 20 years ago, I moved to Bend with my lovely wife, who actually grew up in Bend, and had to leave Bend in the late 80s because there was no jobs. The timber industry had been decimated, and there was no jobs and no opportunity in Bend. That is clearly changed now, and we're fortunate and blessed enough to be able to raise a family. We have 2 young kids, 13 and 10, a girl and a boy. And my profession today is a real estate broker. I manage a real estate office in Bend. And then I've also been a small business owner, owning a contracting company, doing repairs and remodels. So I know what it's like to work, get my hands dirty. And then I was elected to the Bend City Council in 2016 and ran as a conservative and have governed as a conservative. I ran against and was elected by a 76% margin, and basically because I was opposed to a gas tax that the city council at the time actually spent $50,000 to avoid conservative voters and had a special election. I thought that was wrong, and they should not have done that. I'm running for Congress because I don't believe that the federal government is doing a good enough job to address all of our issues in rural Oregon. And with the continuing rising cost of living and stagnant wages, I just believe that the federal government can do a much better job giving the tools to local government to make sure that we have good economic development and can have affordable housing as well. Thank you.
Hey, Joe, could you have the guys say their names, because I can't read the name tags and I couldn't hear who was speaking.
Sure, they have been, but please speak up.
Bentz?
My name is Bentz. Joe, thank you so much for all this work. Heather, thank you for all this work. I am a ranch kid. I grew up on a ranch to the east of this location over near the border of Nevada and Oregon. Everything turned on water on that ranch from my granddad's. That ranch was sold in the early 60s, and my mom and dad and granddad bought some more ranches up near Burns and John Day, it means about 60 miles out of town. So we grew up every morning worried about water. After I went through high school and then to college at Eastern Oregon State, I went to law school and I took the water law classes so that I could figure out how to defend the water rights on our ranch. When I got out, I took a job with the Ituri Rose law firm in Ontario, and I made it my job to try to figure out how to litigate and how to be the best lawyer in that space. I also focused again on water in 1984, was appointed to the Water Resource Commission and spent 8 years on that commission and left in 1995. Ultimately, I ran for the legislature. After 30 years of practicing law, my wife's a veterinarian, we saved enough money to allow us to engage in that legislative effort. And I focused on water in that space also. I've been down here before, just 2 nights ago in fact, but I also was down here representing ranchers and farmers in the Klamath Basin adjudication. When I went in the legislature, I handed those cases off to Mr. Yoakum, and then I led the opposition to the dam removal bill later in the House. I lost, I failed. But I know a lot about this space, and I'm very happy to be back, and I hope to be your congressperson. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Mark Roberts. I'm from the Medford area. Grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area in the suburbs and moved here in 2010.
We can't hear. Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I want to thank everybody for showing up. I know you guys drove quite a bit of miles to get here, and I hope everybody's caught up with the loss of an hour. I know I haven't. I could have slept in another hour this morning, but nevertheless, happy to be here. One thing that drives me crazy when I come to Klamath Falls.
Could you speak up, please?
One thing that drives me crazy when I come to Klamath Falls, that I see the issues where the federal government, your federal representative could be of assistance, is the fact that you guys don't have an airport. I mean, you have an airport, but you don't have any travel. I know you guys had a flight here to Portland, which really doesn't get you anywhere. So that's one of the things I'd like to hear people talk about if you want to travel and get out of here. I mean, you're so out in the middle of nowhere that you really can't do any business here. And there's so much agriculture. Highways are not good. And I know we have some water rights here. I'd like to hear from some questions from some farmers. I've always thought they should look at dredging the lake again, maybe taking certain swipes out of it and lowering the level and cooling the water. I know it always comes up that that you're ruining the fishery, but the fishery is already ruined. Nevertheless, I may describe my love with conservatism. I read a lot of books. I'm a very cold blooded conservative. I believe in the tenets set forth in the book Conscience of the Conservative that got Ronald Reagan elected to the presidency, and I'll leave it at that.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Jimmy Curmpacker. I'm a 7th generation Oregonian. My family originally came here in the late 1840s and settled just over the mountains in the Rogue Valley. General John Miller is actually buried in the Jacksonville Cemetery, not far from Medford, and he gave the land there. So we've been around. Question I always get asked is, do you have thick enough skin to be in the political business? And I like to tell people with the last name Curmpacker, if you don't have thick skin, you're in real trouble. So I left the state of Oregon for about 20 years. I went back to Georgetown University and I studied government. And I had the great honor of interning for our last Republican senator, Gordon Smith. And I thought that I was going to go right into government because I was very passionate about it. But a very smart woman told me, don't go straight into government. She said, you need to get a business background. See, that one thing that politicians lack is the understanding of business. So I went and worked on Wall Street and for the last 15 years have been working in the energy business. And I'm very proud that I'm part of kind of the energy revolution in the United States, which will give us an incredible amount of freedom in our foreign policy. When I started in the business, we had 5 million barrels a day that was produced, and now we're up to 12 and a half. So we no longer need Middle Eastern oil, which is important. Now I'm running for this seat because I believe we need a strong conservative representing Oregon, and I do. I believe that President Trump is really stands for the values that I stand for, as far as protecting the Second Amendment, being pro-life, and protecting our borders. I think these are things that we really need to hold close. So thank you very much for your time.
My name is Justus Smith. I'm running for Congress. There are two things that I want to do tonight. The first is I want to inspire hope in you that we can rebuild the middle class in Oregon. The second thing that I want to do is I want to convince you that I am the person that can go to Washington, D.C. and bring that hope of rebuilding the middle class in Oregon into a reality. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in Oregon. I went to school right here at Klamath Falls. I had a really wonderful experience here. I passed my college writing examination right in that seat, right there. And you can check with the registrar. I really did pass. When I was here in Klamath Falls going to school, things were a lot different. You saw a lot of logging trucks rolling down the street, and it was obvious that what drove the Klamath economy was agriculture and logging. And now the biggest employer in Klamath County is the hospital, Sky Lakes Medical Center. We went from an economy where we were producing things to only jobs that they couldn't outsource. You got to ask yourself, how did that happen? How did that happen? And I have an answer. How that happened was we had politicians who embraced globalism, and they outsourced our jobs for decades. And what I'm telling you is that you can have hope that we can change things like the Endangered Species Act and bring those jobs back. But you can't do it here. You got to send somebody to Washington who will take on the fight, who is stubborn enough to not quit, and who is mean enough to not be afraid of a fight. Vote for Jeff Smith.
Thank you very much, Heather. Joe, thanks for organizing, and thanks to everyone here tonight coming out at kind of a challenging time in our nation's history, for sure. One of the great things about this campaign is traveling this huge and beautiful district, meeting all kinds of people and different communities, different ways of life. And what I hear over and over again, and loud and clear, is that people are angry and frustrated. Angry and frustrated at having their values and their views disregarded and disrespected. Of having their jobs, their communities, even their way of life threatened increasingly by the powerful arm of big government. And hearing these stories and meeting people is highly motivating for me, and it makes me want to serve you in Congress. And I'm doing this to fight for the people and places that I've called home for over 2 decades, to be that voice for people who all too often, in my opinion, who've been left out, left behind, and voices silenced by very, very powerful forces in Portland and Washington, D.C. And these are my roots in rural Oregon. I grew up here. I was a son of a homemaker and a butcher, 2 people who never even graduated from high school. But they stressed myself and my brothers that in order to get ahead, you had to work hard in life, you had to play by the rules, and get a really good education. And you should always remember where you came from and that you need to serve and give back. And I've tried to do that in my 4 years in the legislature, and then running against Kate Brown for governor, where I took the fight to Kate Brown and her liberal Portland allies like no one has done before. And I plan to do that once again when I get to Congress. run against Pelosi, AOC, and others. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time tonight.
All right, thank you. Now it's on to other questions, and I've got a system here, and I think I've got this set up so that it's going to be fair to all of you. So I will call the order of those, the order that you'll answer in after I ask the question. Let me see, the first question is specific. Would you support establishing for Klamath Falls special legislation extending the federal essential air service to support the Kingsley Field mission? And first is going to be Cliff Bentz.
Well, of course I would support that. And Mike McLean, the former minority leader in the House, and I are close friends. He is a colonel at Kingsley Field. And he's a colonel in the J Corps, so many people suggest that perhaps that's not a real colonel, but he's not here, so I won't say that very loudly. He is, Klamath Falls, because of your water situation, is hugely challenged for jobs. Kingsley Field is absolutely essential to the survival of this community, and we should be doing everything in our power to assist its continued presence here. So of course I support that legislation.
Thank you. Next is Justin Livingston.
I absolutely would support legislation that furthers the mission of Kingsley Field. I currently sit on the Redmond Airport Committee, where we've actually doubled commercial air service in the last 5 years, and the number of enplanements and deplanements to now just a tick over 1 million people per year. I also serve on the master plan for the Bend Airport. I actually have a history in aviation, and Kingsley Field is a true asset for the United States Air Force. Being a training base, it is an asset for the Klamath Falls area. And what we need to do is actually bring more modern jets. They're flying jets, the F-15E Eagles, that are 50 years old. And bringing in the F-15Xs or possibly F-35s that help train the next generation of pilots would absolutely be critical for that base to remain a solid asset for this region. Thank you.
And Jason Atkinson.
Thank you. I absolutely support the suspension of those rules that will keep the mission here. The issue, Mr. Livingston actually said it the best. The issue is that in order for the mission in Klamath Falls to not only be saved but to move forward, we have to get the military department to put modern airplanes here. The fact is there's only 2 places in the lower 48 that you can train like we can train here. Klamath Falls, with our ability to fly from here and be in Harney County for war maneuvers, and I think it's Sweet Home outside of Boise, which is the other base in the Bruno Valley, are the 2 places in the lower 48 that we can train for the theaters of war that we practice in. I will also, of course, I support that, and I think my friend Cliff also made a great point about the economy. The other thing I will, 2 other quick points about it. As far as the old airplanes, if you all remember a former colleague of mine, Colonel Steve Harper, he used to fly those F-16s out of here, and he dented one up, and that one is now mounted at the Medford Airport as a static display up in the air. The other thing I'll tell you about airports that's important to know is that Air Force One can land in Klamath Falls. And those are discussions that our campaign is having for this summer that I'm really excited about. Air Force One can be here.
Where are they coming?
Ken Medenbach.
Yes, I would support that. I don't fly anymore. Back in the early '80s, I was working out of the country or out of the state, and I have no control in an airplane. So I don't know a whole lot about what the issues are with Kingsley Field. But yeah, I would support that though.
Dr. Knute Buehler.
Yeah, thank you, Joe.
Certainly I would support expansion of the mission at Kingsley Field, and also to expand the opportunities for commercial service into the area. Look, when you have any area and you want to build and improve the economy, you have to leverage and get a return on your assets. And one of the most valuable assets in this area is that airport. And that's the role of government, right? The role of government is to be that partner for business success. Unfortunately, all too often in this state, we've set up a very antagonistic relationship. We need to have leaders, and certainly I would use the platform of being elected to Congress to build upon the assets of every area in the state of Oregon, so that we have not only successful small businesses, but also we have recovery of our traditional jobs in ranching, in farming, and in timber. And that's the role of government, is to build on those assets, remove barriers, rules, regulation that cost people's jobs, and really inhibit people's businesses from growing like they should. And that's what leadership is all about. I've showed that kind of leadership in the Central Oregon area, where we've built a very robust economy, leveraging different types of assets. But there's no reason an area like Klamath Falls, with the natural beauty, with the airports, with the natural resources here, that we can't also have a very successful economy.
Jeff Smith.
Having been in the aerospace business virtually all of my adult life, I absolutely support more aerospace assets, such as the F-35 and other aircraft, to be used and utilized here in Klamath Falls. I would have to agree that using a long-standing field like Kingsley Field, we can use that to build a part of our economy that is lagging behind right now. And so, yes, definitely, I would support that.
And finally, Jimmy Curmpacker.
I think that supporting it seems to be unanimous now. So I think that, yes, obviously this is something where infrastructure helps. It doesn't matter what that infrastructure is. If you're talking about building roads, that helps the economy, right? You're talking about construction jobs. You're talking about links to the economies that we are surrounded by. And an airport is a phenomenal link. It allows people to come in. If you had commercial flights, we were talking about a huge uptick in opening the area to tourism and to economic growth. And these are all things that are very positive. I mean, throughout the world, whenever you build infrastructure, positive things follow. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's an airport or if it's a highway or a freeway or if it's a dam. If you build things that are infrastructure, it helps local economies. So it's something that is a no-brainer to me, and this is something that the federal government really should be specializing in. The federal government should be doing things that help people in areas, and this is an area where they can really specialize in. Infrastructure, at the end of the day, is something that helps everyone, whether it's a road or an airport, and that is really what the government is there for. The government, I believe, should be incredibly small. I believe in small government, but at the same time, the areas where the government should be robust is in the infrastructure, because it's for the betterment of all of us. So I would agree. And I think, Mark, have you?
Yes, I misspoke. Mark Roberts.
Thank you. So I'm a weapons guy and a forestry guy, and they are flying F-15 C and D models here. They aren't necessarily legacy aircraft, and then we consider it legacy aircraft in the aviation field, which is part of the work that I do. But of course I support the furthering of the base. I mean, this sounds like state legislation. I know the guys at the base like to be here. I think it's unlikely that we'll see a F-35, even a Block 1 F-35 contingent move in here, because it's too, I don't think that the base itself can handle the amount of manpower that those ships need technologically. But I mean, I love to see the planes. They come into Medford, they fly over my house, you know. and I think I'm not alone in that area. As far as airports, one, I just looked at the dry weight on it. It's 525,000 pounds. That's about 300,000 pounds too heavy for your airport, which is why you don't have a VLAT base here.
The largest plane in the world. Okay, moving on to the next question. Yeah, you'll have your opportunity as soon as we adjourn this up here. All right, next question, and we're going to start with Dr. Knute Buehler. What do you see as the Klamath Basin's greatest assets, and how could you help to build or better utilize those assets?
Thanks for the question, Joe. Certainly what we just talked about, you have to build from your strength. Certainly one strength in the Klamath Basin is having a wonderful airport. I think we've said enough about that. But the second thing is where we're sitting right now, OIT. It's a wonderful, wonderful institution. It's growing, it's healthy. Look, I had a niece who moved all the way out from Chicago just so she could come down here and be part of the health technology program that she had heard about. That is an asset that is really wonderful in this community and needs to be built upon. And let's not forget the natural resource base here, which has been the strength of this economy and in this area for decades. There's no reason why we cannot get back to a healthy economy in our traditional jobs in ranching, farming, in timber. Those are the types of things that will take leadership, of course, leadership from congressional representation that really pushes the issues, that really fights the fight and says, hey, look, this area has been struggling for way too long. And the main reason is because the burdensome rules and regulations that's been imposed on many rural areas in Oregon. And when I'm in Congress, I'll vote to reduce, cut back, scale back those burdensome rules and regulations that have created so much difficulties in so much of Congressional District 2. Those are the kinds of assets that if you work on them together with good leadership, that you can see a really robust economy come back in not only Klamath County, but so much of the district.
Thank you. Next, Jeff Smith.
Our economy has been in decline for decades. And the reason is, in 1990, the northern spotted owl was listed on the Endangered Species, under the Endangered Species Act, and within 5 years, we were cutting between 2 and 3% of what we had been cutting off of our national forest. Klamath County, 58% of it is owned by the federal government. We have to change the laws. And to do that, you're going to have to send somebody back to Washington, D.C. who is not afraid to rock the boat and stir the pot and make people angry enough that things get done. I'm that person, Jeff Smith.
Jimmy Curmpacker.
Yeah, I'm going to just talk about what Jeff was just talking about. That's something that really shocked me when I moved back to Oregon after being away for 20 years. I was saddened by what had happened to our timber industry. We had 85,000 timber jobs when I was a kid. That number's down to 25,000. It was 8% of the GDP of the state of Oregon. That number is less than 1%. And Jeff was exactly right. The federal government is responsible for this, because 53% of this state is, I would say, owned by the federal government, but we actually manage that land from the 1840s until the 90s, and we did a really good job of it. We did nearly 5 billion board feet of timber a year in the state of Oregon. That number's gone down to 2.5 billion. Those forests haven't gone anywhere. They need to be opened back up. You need someone in Washington to tell this story, because I'll tell you, when you go back there, people do not understand it. Because in a lot of states, like I was in the energy business, the state of Texas, only 2% of the state of Texas is federally managed. People don't understand what we're going through. And I equate it to the federal government going to Texas and telling them they cannot drill for oil. We need someone to tell this story, to fight for Oregonians. Because what is happening after 25 years of not managing this land? It's going up in flames. We're losing 500 to 800,000 acres a year to forest fire. That is inexcusable. And that is because they're not allowing us to manage our own lands. And I'm fed up with it. Because there are a lot of job opportunities out there, and those are good paying jobs. And we need the federal government to get their hands off of our throat.
Mark Roberts.
Read the question again for me?
Sure. Let's see. This was about,
Greatest resources.
yeah, what do you see as the Klamath Basin's greatest assets, and how can you help build or better utilize those assets?
So obviously the greatest resource here is timber. Unfortunately, we lost an industry 30 years ago and people forgot about it. The industry is basically being held by essentially 5 people. 5 people that very profitable nonprofits. There are single-man operations, and there's 2 in my county, Jackson County, and 3 in the east. And essentially what they do is take donations from wealthy people in Portland and turn those donations into funding for grants. And then they take those grants and they hire attorneys. And in the meantime, they pay themselves upwards of 6 figures. And so when they lose in the NEPA process, and there's about 7 steps in the NEPA process, 5 of them are collaborative. Now this is the problem, and this is where the law needs to change. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen in a Democratic minority, is that the rules have to be narrowed in the NEPA stages. This law dates back to 1967. So what happens with these people, when they lose, they get sour grapes and they take your Forest Service to court. Now I've been to court in the last 4 or 5 cases. We currently have 3 going on and 1 that's down in this 9th Circuit. So I invite you to come to court with me and actually see what these people look like, because they pack the courtroom, and that's the job of your congressman. The 2nd District congressman needs to lead in the forestry department. We have 6 of Oregon's 10 forests, and our congresspeople have left Oregon, gone to Washington, and played political games. This isn't a place, this isn't a district that's unique. This district is unique, and it has to be treated uniquely. The congressman has to represent the constituency instead of the donors.
Thank you. Cliff Bentz.
So I had the great opportunity as a legislator to serve on the Economic Development Committee, and I took the opportunity to travel around my district and go to each of the small towns and sit down with them and do what I call a lifeboat analysis, which meant you kind of pretended you were in a lifeboat and you tried to figure out what your best assets were and what you could do to make that little town survive, what you could perhaps start using that you had been taking for granted. It was quite the exercise, and I repeated it many times with many of my little cities. And a lot of good things came from that, but one thing that came from it is that I suddenly realized it wasn't the timber, it wasn't the water, it wasn't the natural resources, it was the people. I'm looking at the greatest natural asset. I'm looking right at it. You're the greatest natural asset. Because without you, there's no city here. And so what you do is you've got to go to the folks of the space, and you've got to say, what can we do to help you? What can we do to make your kids smarter? What can we do to keep them here? Because you're the greatest asset. And this is, I have to apologize for how long it took me to figure this out, but it's the truth. And so if I were your congressperson, the first thing I would be doing is coming back here and asking that exact question. Now it's easy for me to focus on water because that's been my life, to try to protect water for our Eastern Oregon communities because it's so important. But keeping you guys here and filling these seats. I came to your awards banquet for your Chamber of Commerce, and I was astounded to see such great folks. By the way, you have a real asset in the form of your theater. But it was amazing to see that guy that built that little fire thing, right? That's amazing. That's one of the people in your community. And so your greatest asset is your people, and I do what I could to help them and you.
Justin Livingston.
I guess that's the downside of having so many candidates, is that some people are going to steal your thunder. Thanks, Cliff. But no, really, people are the asset, and that is the greatest asset of Oregon, and really all of Oregon. But how do we get the people to get into the trades and get into work that pays well? Throughout this entire state, throughout the entire district, we have a shortage in tradespeople, plumbers, electricians, framers. It's a problem all over the place, and what it's doing is it's driving up the cost of construction, which is also driving up the cost of living and the cost of housing. And so what I would really like to see is also just expanding and giving the area the tools and maybe the funding to already work on what you guys are already doing. The trade school efforts that are going on at Klamath Community College could be expanded. It could be, you could bring other people into that trade school to actually to learn different trades. Clearly, the timber industry, I think we all agree, we're not cutting enough. We need to get jobs back in the woods. We need to cut at a sustainable yield. Not only is it good for jobs and good for the economy, but the forest fires that we deal with every summer that are choking our skies, and months on end, we're dealing with smoke, and the impact that has on people's health and their daily lives, and what they're able to do to get outside and enjoy the beauty of the area is really important. I think getting back into the woods and getting people back to work there is really important for a lot of reasons. Thank you.
Jason Atkinson.
Well, I'm not going to give a history lesson, but I will tell you this. I'm a Republican because Republicans believe in the freedom of the individual. And the freedom of the individual is one of the main reasons why I chose to be in public service all those years ago. It is true what my two colleagues have said. The person, people, are the most valuable asset everywhere we go in this country. And I'm not just saying that as a candidate. I married one, as I said, from OIT. I believe in the people here. Of course, I was in the trenches in the Oregon State Senate when the Biscuit Fire broke out, when we fought back over the BLM and how much the fact that over half the state of Oregon is owned by the federal government. All the times we fought back against extreme environmentalists trying to lawsuit their way into stopping things. We fought back on all the attempts to raise taxes, from payroll taxes and gas taxes and all the rest of it. But I'm not saying that because I'm a politician. I fundamentally believe in the power of the individual as the most important thing. When we were coming here today, let me back up for a second. The number one job is not what a politician says he's going to do. It's the kind of constituent service they actually do once they're in office. And I am very proud of the fact that when I was in the Senate for 14 years, my shop had the best reputation for doing the best constituent service all across the state of Oregon. And it never stopped. Driving here just a moment ago, we just ironed out a Pacific Source insurance nightmare for a friend of mine who's suffering from cancer. All of a sudden their insurance got canceled, and so they called their old friend Senator Atkinson, who's not in office right now, to iron the whole thing out. Let me tell you, public service is about serving people as the number one asset, and if that means picking up the phone at the end of the day to help somebody get their insurance solved, that's the kind of congressman I will be.
Kenneth Medenbach.
In regards to federal lands in the states, Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the Constitution states that Congress will have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting territory or other property belonging to the United States. The state of Oregon is not a territory. Idaho is not a territory. California is not a territory. Half the land in all these states is covered by the federal government. Other property, that's what Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17, Congress will have authority over places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be used for forts, arsenals, magazines, stockyards, and other needful buildings. The United States Supreme Court is misinterpreting the Constitution in the favor of the United States government. And I've read extensive stuff on this in it just blows me away that they're getting away with this stuff. And also down here in the Klamath Basin, I mean, ranchers and farmers, they have to have the water. I mean, a couple years ago, when the guys from Kid, we were going to man the head gates and not let the government shut off the head gates because on Canal A and or A Canal, and we were just so frustrated. Fortunately, the U.S. District Court found it in favor of the farmers and ranchers, and that didn't happen. But these lands in the states and government is not constitutional, and even the Supreme Court is not constitutional because there's nothing in the Constitution that says they can tell us what the Constitution means. I mean, why would we have write a Constitution, we the people, to ordain and establish this Constitution for ourselves and our posterity? Why would we give the government the power to tell us what the Constitution means? That's putting the fox in the hen house situation. And I can prove that the federal government doesn't have this authority. And thank you.
Thank you. This next question is a three-part question. So when it's your turn, let me know if you need me to repeat any or all of it, and I will. As a region that is at the forefront of water issues, how this valuable resource is allocated among varied interests is a primary concern to us. What is your position, this is the first part, what is your position on how to best make these decisions? Second, what do you believe are the allocation priorities? And third, what can we expect from you regarding your involvement in resolving Klamath Basin water issues? And we're going to start with Mark Roberts.
So, can you tell me the first part of that question?
Sure. What is your position on how to best make these decisions?
So, unfortunately, we're facing issues with where we can't count on the weather anymore continually. In the meantime, we've increased the amount of people in the state in the last 30 years. So we have issues that probably can't be solved just because of logistics. I'm sorry, what was the second part?
Second part is, what do you believe are the allegation priorities?
What are the allegation priorities? I mean, everybody has to be able to get their fair share. I know some of you guys have your own, what's the word? Anyway, you've banded together and you're spreading the water around. I know they're doing it in Malheur County, and we're subsidizing land in the Tule Lake District on each side of the California and Oregon border because we don't have enough water. At some point, we've reached a critical mass. Everybody has to have water. Now the people in Malheur County want to be reimbursed, and it's a reasonable, because they're leaving lands fallow, it's a reasonable request, but how many times can you keep going back to the Treasury and cutting people a check? So look, we don't have the water. I wish we did. I don't know what the solution is. I think I'm good.
Okay. Next is Cliff Bentz.
Well, I don't think there's a more difficult question that could have been asked, and I'm happy for the question. But so how we allocate water goes back to how we adopted the prior appropriation doctrine back in the early 1900s. And the reason we wanted to have a water system that was firm and reliable is so that people would take the risk of going into ranching and farming and would have the force of government behind them when they sat down went down to the bank, borrowed the money, bought the ranch, and then thought that they could divert the water. So the problem was that along came the ESA, and along came the Clean Water Act, and along came other things in the 70s, and then in the 80s, all of a sudden, all of that certainty that had been provided by the Water Act of 1909 went into, I hate to say the dumpster, but it certainly went away. So all you guys have lived this, and I have lived it as a water lawyer litigator. Am I suggesting that we do away with all of this? Well, we can't. But we can go in and we can begin to change some of those things in Congress, and that's where I would try to help you do so. The allocation priorities are extraordinarily difficult because of prior appropriation doctrine. You all know whoever got there first gets it. Sometimes that's not the best way to use the water, but that's the law. If if we want to make changes in that space, you have to do so with such great care because you are upsetting justifiable expectations. If you elect me, I'll do my very, very, very best to try to assist all of you whose expectations have been upset by these new federal laws.
Thank you. And next is Justin Livingston.
I know water is a very touchy subject and a complex subject in the Klamath Basin. The way I see it, because honestly I'm not steeped in all the details that are specific to the basin, but I see water rights as a property right, and to me property rights, people have the right to property, and so I have a hard time going back on senior rights or junior rights, but really what I think what needs to happen is that the groups the community can self-govern better, that anybody in Washington DC can come up with a solution for you. I can't come up with a solution for you. You guys need to help bring a solution and work together, and then I would actually go back and advocate for that in Washington DC.
Jason Atkinson.
Whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And anybody that doesn't know that has never lived in the Klamath Basin. Let me answer the question very succinctly. The first part of the question is, what do I support? And I support the fact that we had an opportunity for farmers to have a guaranteed floor of water and to have their power rates capped. Right now, we don't have that. Some of our farmers in the Klamath Water Users Association have seen their rates increase up to 1,000%. What used to be $2,500 in fees now has gone up to close to 85 or 100,000. Another farmer told me he used to pay close to 100 grand, is now being billed up to 600 grand for the same power. That doesn't work for anybody. Number two is, we used to have the idea of being able to guarantee a floor of water, which gets to the second part of the question, Joe. Who gets the priority? And it's absolutely true after adjudication has been finished. Part of that answer is taken care of now by the courts, but the number one priority is farmers in allocation, not adjudication, in allocation. And number three, what is my commitment as a congressman? My commitment is this. I will work with the community through all of the blood that I'm sure will come in order to get us back to the table so that farmers have a cap on power rates and have their floor of water. And I will assign staff support, and you will have my support, because being the only Republican running who could be the first Republican for Congress who is from here, when I fly home, I fly here. I will guarantee staff time and my time. I am fully committed. I am so committed, before you cut me off, if you go to my website, 12,000 people have clicked on our link regarding the Klamath. It's called Klamath, JasonAtkinsonForCongress.com, Klamath. Or if you would like to see 5 years of my life and 2 people in this room have been in a movie I made called A River Between Us. And you can see it on Amazon and iTunes, and it completely lays out everything I just said.
I don't have a gavel.
Not that I'm passionate about this at all.
Okay, next is Kenneth Medenbach.
A couple of years ago when we were going to man the gate, head gates there at Canal A, and finally what happened is that the district court violated the Endangered Species Act by giving the farmers and ranchers the water instead of the extra foot of water on Klamath Lake for the suckerfish. And why did they do that? When I was down here during that time, and this is kind of radical thinking, but I've gone out to the what's the name of the people that they're on the south end of town. It's a federal agency. Say it again. DOR. Yeah. Department of Reclamation, right. Well, I've gone out there and talked to those guys like 3 times about, where do they get the power to take care of these head gates. And they would never answer me. They'd never answer me. And then, of course, then Ammon Bundy came to town and went to Wairika for a speech. So everybody, and I was at a PCP meeting, and everybody was talking about Ammon Bundy's coming with militia. And I thought, no, he's not. And because I know him. And but I think they put enough scare in the Tar and Reclamation, because I understand that they were all geared up for militia invasion, which was never even in a thought. But it was interesting to see that how all this transpired, and I'm not sure exactly how, why, for sure. But I know, Second Amendment, well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. This is not a free state. 53% of the land belongs to the federal government. Thank you.
Dr. Buehler?
Thanks, Joe. Certainly, I have little confidence, if any confidence, in the court system being able to adequately allocate the water. I think that is clear. And there are models out there of how to do this without getting into adjudication. Places like the Deschutes River Basin, there's an organization called the Deschutes River Conservancy that gets the community members together on both sides of this issue, both the natural resource-based stakeholders and the environmental stakeholders, government entities, and they've been able to start to reallocate the water. They've paid for piping projects. They have a swap system for water rights, where there's some farmers who don't need as much water as they've been allocated, and others need more, like in the North Unit Irrigation District, which have junior water rights. So we need to keep it out of the courts, and the community needs to get together and try to solve that. There was great efforts here in the past when we had a governor who would actually come down here and lead and roll up their sleeves and try to help the community out. The allocation priority, your second question, Joe. Look, I think people and farms and jobs need to come before fish. And unlike Jason, I would not be tearing out dams here. I think that is the last answer. Okay, we need to preserve the farms and the ranches that have made this area famous, and we need to find a way to store the water that is going to serve both the community and the farms and the jobs that they depend on. But there needs to be a solution, and as your member of Congress, I would take a leadership role in trying to bring parties together.
Okay, Jason, since your name was mentioned, do you have a rebuttal?
You bet. Thanks for coming to Klamath Falls, Knute. You know, when his campaign for Congress called, or for governor called, they asked me what his position should be on the Klamath, and apparently his new consultants have told him something different. The fact is this: KBRA would have given us a floor of water, and it would have capped power rates for farmers. His consultants haven't quite figured that out yet. I suggest maybe you should watch my movie, A River Between Us. There's a bunch of folks here that are in it. You'd like to meet them.
Well, I actually try to work on the issues and don't run away from farmers and ranchers and make movies with my Hollywood buddies.
That's really great. Let me tell you, I don't have Hollywood buddies. The funds for that film came right here out of Southern Oregon. We didn't run away from it. I wasn't in office when we made that movie. Our family has been working alongside farmers and agriculture in this area for 90 years on that solution. And you're very thankful that my wife is getting ready, because she would take your head off if she heard you say that when she was here. Believe you me. We never run from a fight. We never will run from a fight. And our work in this valley, it makes me proud.
Okay, next, Jimmy Curmpacker.
Okay.
Follow that.
Yeah, wow. I think the priority has to be listening. You know, I think too often politicians think that they have all the answers. And I'm not a politician. This is the first time I've ever run for office. I'm a business guy, like our president. And I try to surround myself with very smart people. And what smart people say is that the farmers need to be the priority here. And the dam removal is not the right answer. And we are also hearing this in another part of this district. They're talking about removing dams up on the Snake River. And it makes no sense to me. It really does not. The priorities need to be the farms. That is bar none what you have to do. And we got a text message from your great Senator Dennis Lithcomb, and he actually is losing water rights right now. The state of Oregon is telling him in March that he won't have water rights the rest of the year. Now that is just wrong. And that is inexcusable. You can't make up the rules as you go along. And I'm going to listen to the people of this community, and I'm going to try to make the best decision for this district. But my priority will be the farms. There is no doubt about that. Thank you.
Jeff Smith?
Any of you not quite as clear as you would hope on all three of those aspects of that question? I'm not very clear on it, but I'll tell you a couple things that I am clear on. People are more important than animals or fish. And when you have a federal judge telling us how we can run our life based on the rights of an animal or fish, they've got the wrong answer. And the reason why they can have that answer is because of the federal laws. And from this podium, you've heard, we can't change those laws. I'm telling you we can. And we ought to. And we need to. We have a chance a very slim chance in the next 4 years that we might change those laws and get our lifestyle back. And what I'm asking you to do is to support me with the hope that I will go to Washington and try to change those laws. That is our only hope, to actually have a voice that will be heard in these discussions.
Okay, thank you. Next question. How do you intend to address the rising cost, the poor coverage, the lack of access, the waste, and the administrative inefficiencies in our healthcare system today? And the first candidate to answer that is going to be Justus Livingston.
Well, the first answer to that is get the federal government out of the healthcare industry. And it's really not the healthcare industry, it's the health insurance industry. And what I would want to see is actually more competition in the market, because really what the problem is that we don't have competition. Being a small business owner, I buy my health insurance on the private market, and going through the healthcare.gov website to buy insurance is not the easiest thing to do, and there's not very many options. And so we need to get more competition to drive down costs, and then also drive down the cost of providing the health care. When we have, for example, in the city of Bend or in the Central Oregon area, we have one health service that runs all the hospitals in the entire Central Oregon area. They are a major cost driver why my private insurance is so high. And so we need to actually drive down the cost of providing the care, but also we need guaranteed renewability on health care, on health insurance. We need to, and then once you have health insurance, then you have that guaranteed renewability. Every year since Obamacare, I think I've had a different insurance policy and different insurance carrier every single year. We just can't do that, and so I don't have the ability to shop because I'm losing carriers, and so we need to bring more competition and actually provide more competition into the market, which will drive down the cost of providing health insurance. Thank you.
Dr. Knute Buehler.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Look, I believe that we can lower the high cost of health care by empowering patients, by using technology and applying market forces to our health system. I'll vote to decrease healthcare costs in our insurance industry, especially the prescription drug industry. And I've worked on those issues in the Oregon State Legislature, and I continue that work in Congress. For many years, I managed a large medical clinic in Bend, over 300 employees. And this industry, healthcare, is highly, highly regulated. We have constant audits, inspections, rules and regulation. It's one of the reasons why I initially ran for the legislature in the first first place, is because I just got tired of it, and more importantly, my wife got tired of me complaining about it. And she said, look, you either have to quit complaining about these issues or you need to stand up and do something about it, and that's what I've done when I've been in the Oregon legislature. But I can tell you for sure that a government takeover of our healthcare system, like crazy Bernie Sanders Medicare for All, will be a disaster for all of us, for patients, for doctors, and for our health system.
I noticed we've got another dignitary that joined us. Please welcome Representative Warner-Reschke.
I'm back in state because we're out of session now, so.
All right. Next for that question is Jimmy Curmpacker.
Well, I don't have the experience of a doctor, unfortunately. But what I do know is that Obamacare has really driven up costs, and that is something that I will fight to end if I get back into Congress. You know, raising this whole perspective that they're fighting for on the left of this cradle to grave, that they'll take care of you no matter what, that doesn't work. And it doesn't work in healthcare either. And all you're doing is screwing up the system more and more. Someone found that really funny. I think a critical issue that has not been discussed so far is also tort reform. I'm sure Knute can tell you some real horror stories about lawyers just suing people, doctors especially, and those lawsuits really drive up the cost of healthcare to enormous rates, because health insurance at the end of the day is driven by the lawsuits against doctors. We need tort reform, not only in the healthcare industry, but across all industries. And part of the problem is that half the legislature are lawyers, so they're protecting their own. And that's a major issue, because they don't want to end these massive lawsuits. And this is something that people don't discuss enough. But we need to make changes, and this is a real change that we can make. And then pharmaceutical industry. I mean, this is something that is a little scary. They have so much power. They are the #1 lobbyist group in the United States. And because I'm not a politician, I've never taken $1 from any lobbyist. And I am scared of the lobbyist impact on the legislature, because we need lower prices for drugs. I mean, all you have to do is go to Canada and see what we can actually, oh, sorry. Well, thank you.
We've got another dignitary that's joined us, Klamath Falls City Councilman Todd Andres. Is that your princess wife? Yeah. Okay, next is Jeff Smith.
On my website, sendjeff2congress.com, I have a whole page on the rising cost of healthcare. And it delineates how Congress has enacted, starting in the early 1900s, laws that limited things that are absolutely crucial to lowering healthcare costs, namely doctors. There's only one place in Oregon that you can become a medical doctor. We have way too few doctors. We have way too few nurses. We need to enable colleges to start medical programs and start graduating 2 to 3 times the number of doctors immediately. Nobody comes up with the basic problem is a supply and demand. If you've ever went to try to get a brand new doctor, you are up for a very, very tough fight to find a doctor that will take you as a new patient. And the reason is because we have way less doctors than most of the industrialized world. We need to graduate more doctors, nurses, and other health providers. That is the root of the problem, and that's where we need to start. And it was caused by lobbying, like the American Medical Association, you know, the lobbying of the medical doctors to limit the number of doctors that are graduated every year.
You need a doctor.
I might.
Okay, next, Jason Atkinson.
Thank you. I agree. The federal government has got no place in healthcare. The federal government has not proven itself able to run anything, let alone healthcare. If we thought that healthcare run by the federal government works well, we would have wonderful scorecards and happy people who visit the Veterans Administration. So you just can't have that here. For me and my family, my son was born under very difficult circumstances. At 5 years old, he had cancer. My wife had cancer, and I went through an episode of bad health. And because of all that, and because I'm self-employed and have been an entrepreneur my whole career, my monthly bill is $1,800 a month, and I get nothing for it. That's what I have to pay in order to cover just 3 of us. And if you multiply that across everyone in this room, you're paying more, you're getting less, prescription drugs are not available. And in the case that I mentioned just a moment ago, where I called and leaned on an insurance company to help fix a problem for somebody that's facing cancer in Seattle, you know that system just doesn't work. And so what does work? I think we have to have competition in the marketplace. I think you have to drive costs down. And I think there's things that are part of the healthcare system that we don't cover. I did a project here a year ago in Klamath Falls on teen suicide. And all of you are very well aware of how high teen suicide is in Klamath County. It's by per capita one of the highest tragedies in this county across the nation. And what are those solutions? They're not going to come from the federal government. And so I agree with my colleagues up here. I think that the local decisions have to be made here, and we have to have more competition. But for me, I'll tell you, $1,800 a month for bad coverage is bad.
Kenneth Medenbach.
Well, I was listening to President Trump this morning on a recent town hall meeting that he had, and I thought he was spot on. You know, he was talking about right now they're having to manage Obamacare until they can change things when we get majority in the House of Representatives, and of course then carry on with the Senate and the President all being Republicans, that they can manage their own, the new health care that they're going to have with pre-existing issues for 100% paid off. So he seemed like he had everything, well, right now they can't do much without the House being, having more people in the Republican Party in there. And then he thinks that we can get it all under control.
Okay, Mark Roberts.
So I take a little bit of a different view when it comes to medical care. I don't believe we need the free market involved, but we also need some authoritarianism in regulating how the costs are driven. And as one of our fellow candidates said, that the cost driver is the insurance company, and every political official in this country is tainted by medical dollars. So it's going to be very hard to do something when your representative's best interest is not in you, but in the insurance company. So there's an intrinsic reason why if you go to your Klamath Falls hospital and get an MRI, and you go to Japan and get the same MRI, but there's a $3,000 difference, that's because of the amount of people that are involved on the insurer side. And the more people that are involved in the insurer side means more people that are involved in the doctor side. Dr. Buehler the other night said he ran a practice with 300 people. I'll bet you 20% of those people didn't even work in medicine. They had to keep up with the insurance companies to keep the money flowing, to keep the lights on. So I think we need to do some regulation. This is that kind of esoteric stuff. We need to cut back on utilization review, nurse case managers, medical review officers. We really need to trim the fat out of the insurers before we're going to be able to cut the costs.
Well, I'll just chime in since I was mentioned, but 20% of our employees were involved in just pushing pay line.
Bentz.
So I was tempted to say we should stop all knee and hip replacements that Dr. Buehler's been.
Now we're taking it too far.
So it's a $3.3 trillion issue, and for me to sit here and say how we would resolve it would be embarrassing for me. I will guarantee you that I would work at this because this is such a huge issue, and it's so incredibly challenging. We are victims, I think, of the incredible, amazing advances in medical care that people like Dr. Buehler have created. He's an inventor. He's put together new things that we all want for our knees and our hips. And so it's no surprise that the cost of these things is going up, and we all want them. My dad the other day, he's 95 years old. He said, God, my hip really hurts. I go, too bad, Dad. 95 years old. I mean, just because you're in the war and you got hurt. But anyway, the point is, he wants, and as we all do, those kinds of advanced repairs. And so who can blame him? The tort reform thing is of great interest to me. I'm a lawyer, and I've sat through innumerable attempts in the legislature to try to bring about tort reform, unsuccessfully, I might add, because of our Democrat friends who were too busy doing just the opposite. And so the trial lawyers have enormous power in Salem. I'm hoping that's not the case in DC, but I'm guessing that it is. But of course, if we were able to address tort reform, that would be good. I will suggest to you as a lawyer, when I bring up tort reform in my office, when someone comes in who's been hurt by a doctor, they're not enthusiastic. So I would just say I am in favor of tort reform, but many of my clients are not.
Thank you. Next, what does the word China mean to you? First will be Kenneth Medenbach.
Well, I think President Trump's pretty much got them under control. They've been pilfering the United States for hundreds of decades. And so it appears he has first thing I think when bring up China is that President Trump's got them under control.
Mark Roberts?
Yeah, China, I've never been there. I heard the food really stinks. It's hard to get into the country to get a visa. I know that. I've been in all the countries around Southeast Asia, but never into China. And I did stop at an airport once. I flew a Chinese airline, and shame on me for that. Pollution, some technology advancements. They're building 40 nuclear reactors in China. In the meantime, they're burning coal like nobody's business and polluting and killing their people, which they don't seem to mind. A lot of bad Chinese goods that are distributed at your local Walmart. China's it's a horrible place, and they're screwing with the rest of their neighbors. And they have a very fat military. They've developed pretty long-range nuclear weapons, at least medium-range nuclear ballistic missiles. I don't believe they have submarines, but they do have aircraft carriers that work better than the Russians do. And they're messing around with fishing rights of their neighbors. So it's a challenge. I think we have to be pretty tough with them. We've been getting hoodwinked a lot in diplomacy, foreign relations, nationally. I'm not so much interested in that. I'm more interested in representing the constituent of this district and our forestry efforts here, and we should be able to prosper ourselves like the rest of the nation seems to be. But those are my thoughts.
Okay, Jeff Smith.
China sums up exactly what globalization does to America. It hollows out the middle class. It creates a dearth of manufacturing jobs because they all got exported to China. And I am in manufacturing. I've spent my life manufacturing aerospace parts, and I saw it happen. And along comes Donald Trump, and everybody says, you can't do anything about that. And Donald Trump said, yeah, I can. You ever heard of tariffs? And he was the one that had the guts to say, I'm going to do something about that. America's getting ripped off. We need to make America first again, not because we're greedy or because we're bad people, but simply because we need to protect our own way of life. And China was the very poster child of globalization, started from Bill Clinton on, and Donald Trump was the one that was willing to say, no, we're going to do something. In fact, hell no, we're going to bring those jobs back. And I am the type of person that will do the same thing.
Dr. Buehler.
Jeff, I think you said that really, really well. I agree with everything you said. Look, China has manipulated the global economic system more than any other country. In Trump's efforts to renegotiate these trade deals that truly put America first is what needed to be done long ago. I have first-hand knowledge of China. Some of the products that Cliff referenced in knee and hip replacement, I used to go to China and teach Chinese surgeons how to use those techniques. But you know what we didn't take with us when we went over there was our new technology. We'd always take the last version because they would steal us blind every time we took our new technology over there. And that's the type of manipulation of the global system that China has been doing for decades. The other thing I saw in China is that they pollute like crazy. And we all pay for that pollution. Okay? It goes up in the air and it comes over here and it pollutes our country also. They're not paying for that, we're paying for it. That's the next thing that I think Trump should rein in China, besides their stealing of our technology, but also the polluting of our earth. And it's really out of hand right now and it needs to stop.
Jimmy Curmpacker.
The Chinese have, over the last 20 years, built in this incredible economy, and they have done that by partnering with American companies and then literally forcing American companies to tell them their best trade secrets. I'm talking about technology that has been stolen, and that's a major issue, and that's what Trump is really going after. And what I see in the Chinese is also a solution to a lot of our problems that we've been dealing with in the Middle East. And I say that because I was in the energy business, and we used to import 7 million barrels a day from the Middle East. Now we don't import any barrels from the Middle East. You know who imports 7 million barrels a day? The Chinese. Hey, why don't we focus on number one? Let the Chinese deal with the Middle East. Because over the last 30 years, when we've been over there, all the blood and treasure that we've spent hasn't helped. I think the Chinese should be our solution for the Middle East. Let them deal with the problem. Honestly. I mean, it's been 30 years. We've been over there. Let's come back. Let's focus on us. The Chinese need the oil now. We don't need the oil. You know, the Chinese have a lot of issues. I mean, this is a country that suppresses millions of Uyghurs. I mean, this is a country that is suppressing religious minorities. I mean, they are truly doing things that are evil. And it is sad that it's not being reported enough, because we need to fight for people that don't have the same opportunities. And those people are the Chinese are literally putting them in prison camps. And that is an issue, and we need to expose that.
Justin Livingston.
When Joe first said that, my first thing that came to mind was coronavirus. And I think that's a top of mind for everybody at this time, which I think is in a way good, because what it's really going to show is going to show American companies that you cannot rely on China for manufacturing. And the fallacy of relying on China for manufacturing for the last decade, multiple decades, their supply chains are being severely affected. And what I heard today is that there's actually Apple stores in New York City that are running out of iPhone 11s because they can't get the supply. Talking to other manufacturers in the state of Oregon, they don't have supply chain issues quite yet, but they're anticipating it. And so what I think it will actually do, the silver lining, I believe, to the coronavirus is that it will actually force American companies to diversify their manufacturing sources, hopefully bringing some of those back to our country and to help out the middle class. Because we definitely have exported a lot of our manufacturing made everything right here in Oregon. It was an Oregon company, but getting some of our parts and pieces, sometimes we had to get them from overseas, not from China, not just China, but from Italy and different places. And so I think that is really one of the benefits. And I wasn't always a big fan of tariffs initially, but I think that the way that President Trump's going about it is actually working well. Some of the consumers have not, the price increases have not hit consumers yet, but because of margin compression, they're seeing margin compression in some of these manufacturing. And so once we get some of those, the impact on China's economy with coronavirus, with these tariffs, they're going to have to start looking at different ways to operate their economy. Thank you.
Jason Atkinson.
Thank you. Every one of us have seen on the dollar bill the phrase, "In God we trust." The United States of America was based on individual freedom, based on Judeo-Christian ethics and morals. And from that comes our form of democracy, or our form of the economy, which is capitalism. China is a communist country. China is an amoral country who now practices capitalism. And so if you look at how China conducts business in the world, they have systematically destroyed West Africa and raped it for natural resources and left the people with nothing. As has been said before, they have gone in a genocide against their own people, the Uyghurs in Western China. Absolutely no private property or intellectual property protection is made because their country is based on communism, which is amoral. Whatever builds the state at the expense of the individual. We as Americans build the individual and the state can come in second. It's a fundamental difference. So to answer your question, what does it mean when you say, how do I react to the word China? I respond as communists who should not be our main driver to this economy. And the fact that the President of the United States is starting to slow down the import of not only their goods, but the coronavirus, I think is probably the most important test that we've got in our country today.
Thank you. All right, so based on my watch, we're going to go long regardless. So we got time for one more question and closing statements. And Cliff, you're next.
And I had such a good answer to this question.
No.
So Dennis Richardson, sadly, he's left us, but he took a bunch of us over to China for 2 weeks. And he'd done that with about 8 or 10 of the legislative groups he served with. So I got to go for 2 weeks. And yesterday, 2 days ago, I was listening to Greg Walden speak in Portland, and he was talking about China. And this caused me to remember my visit. And he mentioned you each need to read the book, The 100-Year Marathon. If you don't leave anything with anything tonight, go get the book and read it, because it will educate you as to what the Chinese are doing and how effectively they are doing it. And my visit with Dennis indicates that unless we wake up, and thank God for President Trump doing what he's been doing, unless the rest of us wake up, they're going to eat our lunch. When I came back from China, I thought to myself, we're doomed. Because those people are working really, really hard, and there are roughly 3 or 4 of them to each one of us. We went to a bunch of their schools. I've never seen kids work as hard in my life. I mean, like, focused. And so we have to recognize the danger that that country presents. They currently are equal to us in software. I'm quoting Greg Walden now. They are not the equal to us in our military, thank God. And so what we need to be doing is everything in our power to maintain that advantage militarily. And of course, let's redouble our efforts with our kids. Because the thing that's going to save us in this situation is our intellectual horsepower. So and then there's many, many other things that go into this space. I'll simply say that the point that was made about the breakdown in the supply line, maybe this will let the environmentalists get out of the road so we can start mining some of the rare earth minerals here in Oregon. I hope.
Okay, so we have time for one question, then closing statements, and we're still going to be going long. We're going to start with Jason Atkinson. If the GDP grows at 3%, what would a reasonable government spending rate be, and should the two be linked somehow?
Save the tough question when I go first. I believe in a balanced budget. I do not believe in linking GDP spending at all to federal, to the GDP linked to federal spending, simply because 14 years in the Oregon legislature will tell you that there is absolutely no control of spending when you have a big committee of people. In my experience, and I say this without breaking the 11th commandment, the difference between Republicans and Democrats have been the Republicans spend the same amount of money slower than the Democrats. But in most cases, government spending always goes up. And so the fact that we would ever consider linking it to growth means that if growth slows down, government will not cut back on spending. So I believe very strongly that government needs to prioritize. This is old-fashioned. I was talking today about the fact that we as Republicans no longer talk about a balanced budget amendment, but I do support the fact that the federal government needs to operate like everybody else at a balanced budget. And I do not think for a second that a Congress, as well-intentioned as it ever could be, would actually reduce spending if GDP went down. So I do not support that at all. I wouldn't support that, and I do firmly believe that government does not need any more money. I've never believed that in the Oregon legislature. I never voted for a tax, never voted for a fee, simply because I've never seen a government that went without. Government always finds money at the expense of people that need it the most. As Reagan used to say, you cannot simultaneously grow the government and grow individual freedom. And that's why I do believe that federal spending needs to be under control and on budget.
Jimmy Curmpacker.
Well, as a 41-year-old, I'm a little scared because I'm going to hopefully be around for a long time. And what the government's doing right now is they're spending like they're drunken sailors. I mean, it's crazy. So when I went to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., half my friends just stayed in D.C. and went into the real estate business. And the reason that it's been a very profitable business is because the federal government is ever expanding. It grows and grows and grows. And at some point we need to put a stop to this. I mean, the fact that our deficit, is above $20 trillion is a scary number. I mean, think about that for each individual in this room. I mean, think about what that number means. We need to have some people with some common sense. And I think that this is part of the problem. When you have people in Congress that are career politicians, they lose touch. When you've been back there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you don't understand what it's like to balance a budget because you haven't been in the private sector. I think that that's something that I bring to this race. I've never been in politics. I'm not a politician. That is something that is a benefit. Because I can go back there and I can say, you would never run your business like this. This is crazy, honestly. But you also, can't restrict yourself. You can't say, all right, we're going to only have, to go back to the question, GDP set to 3%. You can't limit yourself like that. That doesn't make any practical sense. But I want to bring a common sense business perspective to Washington. Thank you.
So I think the question was, to what should we link our budget? One of the things that I learned, because we actually prepared for this, and that was one of the questions that was on the list. And I ran it by, the budget question, by a number of people at different ages. And I can guarantee you that anybody over 65 is going to say the budget should start with protecting Social Security and Medicare. I guarantee it. Why? Because I I actually said, well, what happens if we were to, well, reduce that? I almost had my head taken off. And so I guarantee you that if I go to Washington, D.C., I'll be absolutely careful to protect Social Security and Medicare. And why? Because those are promises made, right? And we've heard that phrase, promises made, promises kept, and I'm happy to say that our president is doing exactly that. But when it comes to Social Security and Medicare, 2/3 of the budget. That leaves us 1/3, 1/6 of it is military, the other 1/6 is discretionary spending. And so in that little discretionary spending space, which is every pork chop that the congressman brings home or woman to their district, quite the challenge to question you just asked. But I know where I would start, by making sure that folks of a certain age, probably older than 41, would be promised what we've said they can have, their Social Security and Medicare. But I have to tell you, seeking other ways to limit spending, I too have been in Salem for 12 years, I've seen what happens. That's why I've supported the kicker over and over and over again, not to not let it go away, because it's one of the few ways of stopping spending, because it slows the money down before it comes in. And that's the only way you can control spending.
Okay, an important point of clarification to the candidates, but also you in the audience. I don't know what list of questions he's talking about. None of the candidates got an advanced list of the questions that were asked here tonight. The question they're answering was submitted by you all, somebody in the audience.
Oh yeah, forgive me, I did.
That's okay.
I wish I'd had a list of questions, but no, I don't.
Okay, Kenneth Medenbach.
Well, I don't know, I can't remember did we ever have a balanced budget at one time? I just don't see it happening, but if anybody can get us a balanced budget, it'd be Trump that would get it done. And I'd have to rely on him to get it done from his position, and I'd back him up and support him.
Okay, Justin Livingston.
It's quite the interesting question, because really, the core of the question is, how do we control federal spending? And I think there's probably some nuances in that question that probably could be looked at, but tying federal spending when it goes up, so that way, the federal government isn't growing faster than your pocketbooks is growing. That way, when you're doing well, the federal government could be doing well, and if they actually have incentives to actually provide, to reduce regulation, keep the economy growing. And so I think there is I think it is a valid question. There's a lot of details, I believe, to that, but I think it's something that could be looked at, and there's always lots of unintended consequences, so I think, that would take a little bit more than a few minutes to really think through that process. But I think there can be a way to tie federal spending to some sort of an index, so that way the federal government isn't doing much better than everybody else, because federal spending always seems to outstrip, the raises that we all end up getting, or how much money we are making. How many times did people get double-digit, pay increases? I guess there's not too many of us in this room working a wage that has actually received double-digit increases. Well, the federal government does that on a regular basis, and so I think there can be a way to make sure that federal spending doesn't outstrip what the economy is doing.
Jeff Smith.
The problem is that Congress is on an unsustainable course. The Congressional Budget Office has said time and time again that the amount of deficit that we are racking up every year, which now we're up to $22 trillion in debt, is unsustainable. And what that translates to is, at some point, the American bus is going to go off the cliff, and people are not going to get their Social Security checks. They're not going to have their Medicare paid for. We need to make a change, and this is the change that I would suggest. Instead of making it our problem, let's make it Congress's problem. And let's make it so that there is a that we have an amendment to the Constitution, and it's very simple. You balance the budget, and anybody who doesn't balance the budget and votes for an unbalanced budget, except for in a time of war, they're no longer eligible for Congress ever. And then their problem is really their problem, not our problem.
Mark Roberts.
Yeah, I'm with everybody else. I think back in history, General Eisenhower took over the presidency and he had an $80 billion budget. And he wanted to bring it down to 74 and ended up leaving with 91. So, we just keep spending. We're not an emerging market anymore. We need to focus on balancing the budget. It shouldn't be tied to any index. It's too late in the contemporary history of America. I think you could get even the wackiest Democrat up here who would agree to a balanced budget, but yet they keep telling us about free. And we all know nothing's free. So, where was I? Yeah, thank you. But I know where I was. So, the new norm is pumping $1 trillion every year into the budget. When President Obama did it, he was the devil, and now President Trump is an angel. But still, the debt continues to grow. And we were talking about energy independence. Well, we pretty much lost our energy independence last night. The price of barrel of oil dropped to around 35. The break-even price on a barrel of fracked oil is around 43, 44, maybe 42. So we're going to see layoffs. We're going to see greater imports of cheap oil, and that's going to affect us. We might get back to 3 years of people being on unemployment. Who knows what the ultimate disaster is going to be? But we have to quit spending as a government. I don't know what it's going to take, other than going bankrupt. Maybe at some point people have to look at these loans and say, we can't pay that back, and that just destroys the reputation. And if America goes down, we're the world reserve currency. Unfortunately, the rest of the world goes with us. So we got to do something.
Time. Dr. Buehler.
Thanks, Joe. Look, I believe in limited government. In order to do that, we need to keep taxes and spending as low as possible. So when I'm in Congress, I'll work to hold the line on any new taxes and move us on a path to a balanced budget. Now that's really important because right now we're working under no budget whatsoever. You realize that? Can you imagine running your own business or personal finances and not having a budget? We just have these continuing resolutions where the printing press just keeps on rolling along. And to speak to Jeff's point, you can't prevent someone from running for Congress if they don't pass a budget, but what you can do, and what I would support with the bill, is if Congress doesn't have a budget, until they do, there's no paychecks for the members of Congress. Right? That will get people's attention. Right? And before my life as a surgeon, I was trained as an economist. And there are real metrics to use. Now, using GDP to set your budget's a bad idea, but there has to be a limit on the amount of debt this country takes out. Just like all of you cannot keep on borrowing as much as you want. And we need to set that as a ratio of our total debt of this country. Probably about 75 to 80% of our total GDP. That's our limit of what we can borrow. That's the ceiling. And that's where we are right now. One of the highest levels in the history of this country. Only met when we were in World War II. We had that similar type of level of debt to GDP. That is a huge national security risk. Probably the biggest national security risk that this country faces right now. And it's something that I would focus my attention on getting under control.
My name was mentioned. Once again, we have a potential politician telling you no, it can't be done. What I said was we would have a constitutional amendment. And that would give us the power to say, no, you're not qualified. Right now, there is qualifications for the House of Representatives. All we have to do is change. And Senate, all we have to do is have a constitutional amendment that says if you vote for an unbalanced budget, you're no longer eligible to lead us in Congress.
Okay, it is now time for closing statements. And we're going to go in reverse order of your opening statements. So first up is going to be Dr. Buehler.
Well,
You'll have 3 minutes.
okay. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Heather, for putting this together. Thank you for all of you who've sat through most of this event tonight. As you've seen, there is a lot of talent at this table, a lot of insightful people, a lot of guys who've been very successful in their careers, and they would serve this state very well. But there's one difference between me and everyone else sitting here, and that's I have taken the fight to Governor Brown in the liberal establishment in this state like no one else has. And let me tell you, I have the political scars to show for it. Millions and millions of dollars paid for by Bloomberg, Soros, Planned Parenthood, radical environmental groups against me over the years. And you know why? Because they want to destroy what I stand for and what we believe in. But I'll tell you what, I'm still here, I'm still standing, I'm still willing to fight for the state I love and what I believe in. So I'd be honored to go to Washington and to serve you in Congress, to be your voice for what we hold dear, to stand up and fight for what we hold dear as Americans and as Oregonians. I appreciate your attention, and I certainly would be honored with your vote on May 19th. Thank you very much.
Jeff Smith.
We've talked a lot about various issues. I would like to close by telling you a story. In 2001, I was starting an aerospace manufacturing business. I needed to build a building. I needed to have machines shipped from the East Coast. These were very big machines. Took 2 semis to haul 1 machine. I needed to install those machines. And during that time, I was also having to deal with the fact that my twin daughters had been born 2 months prematurely and were 4.5 hours away from Elgin in Portland in intensive care. And my dad was telling my uncle, who had been in the Pacific on a destroyer, he was telling my uncle about all of these insurmountable problems that I was having in my life, that it looked like there was just no way to get through all these things. And my uncle, who had seen things like kamikaze attacks, he had seen things like the ship right next to your ship getting torpedoed and it sinking. He had seen things, and he came up with this when he heard my story. He said, unless you try, you'll never accomplish anything. Unless you try, you'll never accomplish anything. And what I am suggesting to you is that you have hope, that you can send somebody back to Congress that day in, day out will try to buck the status quo and make changes. The people right now are telling you, no, we can't do it. But I'm telling you, you can have hope. And you can vote for Jeff Smith. Please go to sendjeff2congress.com. I need your vote, I need your help, I need you to volunteer, I need you to donate. And you can do that all on my website, sendjeff2congress.com. So, I have hope to inspire hope in you, and I have hope to convince you that Jeff Smith is the one who's stubborn enough and tough enough to go to Washington and make the changes that need to be made. I ask you for your vote. God bless you, God bless America, and I thank you so much for being here tonight.
Jimmy Curmpacker.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time tonight. This has been a great experience, and as my first forum, I've enjoyed it. You know, I'm not a politician, so I didn't know what I was going to get into coming in here. I've only been laughed at once by our friends over here. But you know, that's great. That's life in the big leagues. And sorry. Yeah, I'm not thin-skinned. I'm very lucky. As soon as I put out my video, I got a torrent of emails calling me a racist because I support President Trump. I mean, can you believe that? A racist. You know, and because I'm proud to be pro-life. And I'm a defender of the Second Amendment. These views all of a sudden make you racist? I mean, come on. It's unbelievable. But there's been great joy in this campaign as well. I've traveled around this district, which is enormous, and I was going through a little town called Grass Valley with my campaign manager, and I'm driving, and we go through, and he says, "Turn around, let's go to the market for a second." I walk in, there's 6 people having lunch there. It's my second cousin sitting there. He goes, "Jimmy Curmpacker." And I say, yes? I've never met this guy before. And it was unbelievable. And then we went to Pendleton that night, and I had a meeting with the guy, and he said, "You need to look up this guy in Baker City." And so we had meetings in Hermiston the next day, and I'm pounding out an email, and this guy walks by and says to my campaign manager, "Are you Buzz?" And we were like, no. And we asked what his name, and he said, "Oh, I'm Tommy." And we said, "Is your dad Tom?" And he said, "Yeah, he's sitting at the table right next to you." And we looked at each other and we said, this is Providence. Sometimes you do things in life and you can't believe the outcome. And I've been very fortunate in life, and I've worked very hard for where I am. And I'm proud to be up on stage with these fine gentlemen. And I ask for your support, because we're going to need someone who's very strong supporting this state and this district. Because we have 6 liberals back in Washington, and we only have 1 conservative. And you need someone who's incredibly strong, who will bring our values there and tell our story. Because it's imperative. When I was back in DC, the fact that people don't realize that the federal government won't allow us on 53% of our land, nobody knows that. We need to go back and tell that story. We need to work with the Trump administration to open up that land. That is critical for our future. I honestly believe that I can be that person for you. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to be brief. I want to thank everybody for coming. I thought the questions were very good. I'm glad we didn't get into any social issues. That's certainly not a conservative cause. I invite you to come join me to a courtroom in Medford so you can watch your forestry or your lack of forestry at work in a courtroom and why your economy is stalled here. We do federal forestry here. We do it every day. On my website, it's Let Oregon Prosper 2, TOO.com. There's a link to the schedule of proposed actions, and you can look at the forest near you and see what kind of work is going on. In the wall forest last year, they had 20 million board feet sales. The county commissioners wanted them to do it again. They said, "We just can't do it." Because they're tired of getting blistered by people and ending up on the losing side. The good news is they're starting to lose. The problem is the public needs to be behind your leader, and we have to figure out a way to defund these people so we can get back into the forest and make it a livelihood once again and return prosperity to Oregon so we can all pursue the American dream. I look forward to hearing from some of you people if you have solutions to the problems in your community, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here. I still want to see a picture of a 747 on your airport. I just checked it out. The rating's 195,000 pounds.
Clip that.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Heather, all your work. When I was 14 on the ranch, I realized we read all the time. By the way, we had books after book. We had no TV. We had no telephone. So we had lots of time to read. And I realized if I would become a lawyer, I could help defend our ranch and our way of life and our water rights. And I became a lawyer. I had to work my way through college at Eastern Oregon State, and I had to work my way through law school. So I appreciate my education. I've used that law degree in protecting our ranch's water rights and then in trying to protect others. That law degree, though, came in handy the other day. 5 months after our president was elected, Greg Walden called and asked if I would assist in vetting his appointees to the Ninth Circuit. So as a lawyer, I got that call. Now, it does happen that I do know a lot of other lawyers, and I was able to serve in that capacity of going through the 44 people that had been selected, or actually they nominated themselves, to go on the Ninth Circuit and be in the U.S. District Court of Appeals. I was one of 2 Republicans on that group. There were 5 Democrats, and we then we whittled a list of potential nominees down to 15, and then we spent 2 days in Portland interviewing each one of them. I'm happy to say we had to do that again just 8 months ago, and I'm happy to say that 2 of those people are now on our federal court, one of whom is on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. What's happening at that level now? What's happening is they have flipped that court because of our president. And that means that my becoming a lawyer panned out. I was able to help put someone in one of the highest levels, thanks to the president, thanks to Greg Walton, one of the highest levels of law in the Western United States, if not the United States. I have a record, by the way. I went to the legislature. You can look at it. It's a good record. I'm happy to have been a politician. I'm happy to have been a person who has had the opportunity to represent a great big chunk of CD2 as a legislator. Look at my record. Again, I am proud of it. And I'm supported by Doug and Gail Whitsitt. Why? Because of my record. I'm supported by 16 of the 20 sheriffs. They've endorsed my candidacy because of my record, because I served in the legislature. So, Jimmy, in all due respect, you are not a politician, that is true. You're not burdened with the mistakes that people make when they vote. And by God, I'm sure I made a bunch. I voted thousands of times. But I am absolutely proud of having served. So I look forward, if you give me the chance, of serving you again in Congress. And thank you so much for being here tonight. This has been an absolutely wonderful conversation.
Justin Livingston.
Thank you all for being here again tonight. Thank you for the questions. Thank you to the Chamber Government Affairs Committee for putting their questions together. I appreciate the audience questions as well. I just got into this race a little less than 2 weeks ago. The reason why was because I was seeing a perspective that wasn't being told. It wasn't being represented. I serve on the Bentz City Council, and so when I talk about coming up with local and regional solutions, I have experience in doing that. Putting together committees to hear all the voices. I might not like them all, but I can tell you in the city of Bend, I definitely don't like them all. But I can disagree with a lot of people, but we can work together to find common ground. And I've done that successfully on the Bend City Council in a 4-3 minority, and I've been able to negotiate some really good deals on the council. One of probably my biggest achievement last year was working with Congressman Walden and Secretary Chow in order to get $60.4 million to realign the North Highway 97 and the north end of Bend at Cooley Road. If anybody's ever driven through Bend on any afternoon, but particularly on a Friday afternoon, coming from Redmond down into Bend or going north on through Bend, around the mall areas at the north end of town, it is an absolute disaster. And we need somebody that actually has the experience, has the perspective of what it's like to be a local elected official and how much the burdensome overregulation of the federal government is and the impact that has on local officials. And we constantly are being preempted by state and federal government on different issues. And permits, we weren't putting in a new sewer line, we were just repairing an aging sewer line that the federal government helped pay in the 70s to install initially. We had to work with 4 different federal agencies to get permits just to repair that sewer line. That was a $500,000 cost to the sewer ratepayers of the city of Bend. That government doesn't have magic pots of money to spend. It's all ratepayer, taxpayer dollars. And that was a tax on the city, on the people of Bend. And I know the federal government is doing it throughout the district. But having somebody in Washington, D.C. that has a perspective on what it is like to be on the ground and actually try to get things accomplished. Because the government that is closest to you, your local council, your county commissioners, your sheriff, those are the people that can be most responsive to your needs and provide those needs to the best job that they can. Because I can tell you as a city councilor, I can screw up somebody's daily life better than anybody else, better than some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. And so working with those local elected officials is super important. That's something I'm committed to doing when I'm elected to Congress.
Jason Atkinson.
Jason Atkinson, and like my colleague Senator Bentz, I'm proud to have served. My first campaign, I ran for office. They said I was too conservative. Lobbyists gave my opponent $40,000. My wife, newly minted from OIT, gave me $100, and I kept winning. And then I ran for the Senate. And all that started from a work ethic that I learned growing up here. My parents are in ministry. Some of you have seen them on television or radio. We run the Dove Network, which is Channel 18 here in Klamath Falls. But because we were in ministry, I had no money, so I worked. We worked on the ranch, and I worked 4 jobs as an undergrad. And when I worked, I got an opportunity to be an intern for Congressman Bob Smith. And my mom went to Meyer and Frank and bought me a new suit. And I was the kid who went to Washington, D.C. And as the old saying says, the only thing that'll get politics out of your blood is formaldehyde. And so I got a very good dose of it. And I'm proud to tell all of you that I am proud of my service. I am proud to be conservative. I am proud that I have been consistently conservative the entire time, both fiscally and socially. I do think social issues are important. I am pro-life. I'm proud of that. It's touched my life in a way that many of you I hope you never have to face that. I am a proud supporter of the Second Amendment. I do, and I'm looking right at you, I do have my concealed carry permit. I am the only person in this race, not only from here, but that does have a State of Jefferson flag on my thrift boat. That's not a political statement as much as the fact that I'm from Southern Oregon. And if I'm your congressman, when I fly home, I fly here. And so what is my commitment on issues that are around water and KBRA and whether or not farmers get water and whether or not there's enough, if power rates are capped, and whether or not we have a group of people that are working together to make better decisions than we have right now? Nobody thinks that the Klamath system of water right now is working well for anyone. If I'm your congressman, I will be here. My staff will be here. We will work. I would encourage you to take a look at our website, jasonatkinson4FOR, congress.com. You'll see some new stuff on there that we're really excited about. I'm very proud to have the opportunity to run, and if I get the privilege to be your congressman, I promise you I will do the best constituent service I know how to do.
Kenneth Medenbach.
Article 6, Section 3 of the United States Constitution states that judges, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath to support the Constitution. Now that's pretty simple. The President takes his own oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. But all judges, everybody in government takes an oath of office to support the Constitution. And this is, I can't believe this happened. Back in 1789, Congress imposed a second oath of office on federal judges to understanding agreeably to the Constitution. And that second oath of office was used in Marbury versus Madison, which is a Supreme Court decision that gave the federal government the power to interpret the Constitution. But there's nothing in the Constitution that says federal judges can take a second oath of office. I can't believe, well, I know why it's still like that, because nobody wants to change anything, because everybody's making money. Congress is making money, the president is making money, the judges are all making money. They don't want to change anything. But if I go to Congress, I'll have that the oath of office imposed in Marbury versus Madison overruled through Congress instead, because I've been fighting this stuff for 25 years through the courts, and all I do is just keep getting to the Supreme Court, and they just deny to hear my case. I will get this oath of office taken off. Judges will no longer be interpreting the Constitution. It'll be done like this. This is a letter from Thomas Jefferson to William Johnson in 1823. But the Chief Justice says, there must be an ultimate arbiter somewhere. True, there must be. But does that prove it as either party? The ultimate arbiter is the people of the Union assembled by their deputies in convention at the call of Congress, or 2/3 of the states. Let them decide, which mean give any authority claimed by the two other organs. I didn't quite ever figure that one out. But somebody told me it was heart and brain, or heart and heart and thought, or something. But anyways, this is how we should be having the Constitution interpreted by elected officials under a Republican form of government. Secondly, if I go to Congress, I'm going to change that so that we, the people, can vote our own electors in to interpret the Constitution how we want it interpreted. But back to the cap and trade program that the issue talking about earlier. This is what happened in California. When California's cap and trade program was launched in 2013, the homeless population in California then was 118,000. 6 years later, in 2019, the homeless population grew to 151,000. That's what's going to happen if we don't stop Kate Brown.
All right. Well, that's it for this evening's program. And personally, I want to thank all of the candidates and your campaign staff. You guys have been great to work with. I think I've put together 24 of these things, either forums or debates, and you folks have made this a pleasure to put together. So thank you. If you're here with the Chamber of Commerce, would you stand up, please? I want to thank you guys for the work that you put into this. You've made this a pleasure, and you helped put this together as smoothly as possible. Finally, I want to thank all of you, number one, for showing up, number two, for the questions that you submitted. They were great questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them all, but we'd be here till after midnight if we tried. Give yourselves a big hand and thank the candidates for showing up.